Hello, biology students. How we doing today? I figure I would record this video so we can actually review some of the topics on Chapter 7. That way you're ready to go on the unit assessment tomorrow, Tuesday. I want to touch upon a couple of topics, including starting at 7.1. If you don't have the book up on the computer, you can go ahead and pause the video and bring up the book and take out the assessments that you've actually done, and so we can go over them. Our changing ecological footprints talks about what an ecological footprint is. So it's not only all the goods and services that we pull from the surrounding land and marine environments, but it's also all the resources that it's going to take to actually clean up our waste. Right, so it's not only, for instance, when we're talking about crops such as corn, such as wheat, the amount of land that's needed to actually produce it, but also like all the different resources, the fossil fuels to run the tractors, and then all the resources that we're going to need to actually clean all these processes, right? All the carbon dioxide that's been produced because of these goods and services, that has to be cleaned up as well. So that takes a lot of resources. And the book talks about the fact that according to some calculations, the average American has an ecological footprint over 4 times larger than the global average. And it is, as the leading economy on the planet, this would make sense that we actually consume. We all know that we live in a consumer society. We actually make our money and trade in goods and services, and it's based on consumerism. The more we consume, the better the economy is, the more that people have jobs, either doing jobs such as services, our plumbers, our electricians, making cars, whatever the case may be. All right, then 7.1 goes on to talk about the age of humans and how that's changed the earth, right? It talks about the Anthropocene. Today, human activities drive global change. Human activity impacts all parts of the planet. It talks about the great acceleration in the 1950s, post-World War II. Great strides in technology were made because of the war effort, and all those inventions for military use were then put into use for civilian life. The practices there, and after that, the improvement in medicine, in healthcare, in how we actually build communities, in getting rid of sewage, hygiene. All these factors together have brought about great changes, right? Where now they've actually come up with a word called anthromes, talk about human-altered biomes. And they gave you a map on page 205. Let's do 7.1 review. I gave you questions 1 and 2. What kind of resources make up your ecological footprint? The answer is one's ecological footprint is made up of resources, resource use such as energy, food, water, shelter, and waste production. Number 2, why are some scientists using the name Anthropocene to describe the current time period? Answer, many scientists feel that because humans are causing global changes that overwhelm the rate and extent of many natural changes, that the current period of time should be called the Anthropocene. Basically, human interaction or human hands in everything globally. Chapter 7.2 is labeled Causes and Effects of Global Change. Talks about human activities affecting global systems by changing atmospheres and the ways that change climate, changing the ways they use land, overharvesting some species, introducing species to new environments, and producing plastics and other pollutants. On page 207 is a big graph that shows all the interactions. And basically the main idea is here that for you to understand that everything's interrelated. Uh, Everything is connected in some way, shape, or form. Thereby, everything affects everything else. When we talk about, for instance, the overfishing of our oceans, right? That in and of itself has contributed to declining numbers of stock in certain fish. So for instance, tuna populations, and but that's not the only thing affecting these populations. We have other things. We have plastics in the ocean. We have pollutants. There's been discovery of mercury actually being introduced into bodies, and we'll talk about that biological magnification and how certain pollutants stay within the body and are not and the organism is not able to clean itself out. That happens to all systems as well when certain areas are polluted. Let's talk about Chernobyl with the nuclear reactor melting in Russia. And basically, that area is going to be contaminated for decades, for hundreds of years, before it can ever be used again. So the cause and effect is that they're talking about. Number one, obviously, is climate change, global warming. Hopefully, by now we've spoken about it, where you understand exactly what that is. Higher concentration of greenhouse gases, of which carbon dioxide is one of them, and methane trap more heat in the biosphere and cause global warming, which drives climate change. We've spoken in class about the greenhouse effect, how up in northern latitudes that they use a glass house to allow the rays of sunshine to come in. The rays then warm up the soils and the pots inside the greenhouse. But what happens is after these molecules have been excited, they then produce heat. And as this heat tries to rise and leave the greenhouse, it can't because it has glass panels. It keeps the heat inside. So it could be very cold outside, right? Let's say it's 35 degrees Fahrenheit outside, temperature at which most plants would not survive. Yet inside the greenhouse would be somewhere in the 60s to 70 degrees. It'd be very warm and toasty in there. That's because of the sun rays, right? And that radiation being captured inside. Well, the same things happen globally around the Earth, right? These CO2 gas, methane, and other gases have created a shield, right? A greenhouse, have a glass house around the Earth, allowing for radiation coming in from the sun to come in, warm up the Earth, right? The land, the oceans. And what happens is normally the heat would rise and leave the Earth again, would escape. Most of it would escape. But what's happening now is it's being trapped. And that's what's rising the actual temperature of the planet. So that is the mechanism. Right, so there's other pollutants as well, other things that are just as concerning. Acid rain, that's something that we've been actually fighting for a long time in industry, in the making of certain products, sometimes everyday products, be it gas, toothpaste, food production, all these sometimes it takes certain chemical reactions of which certain products are released. They're not used, they're not consumed. And well, these are pollutants then that are introduced back into the environment in concentrated amounts. And this has shown up as these pollutants go into waterways, they evaporate. They don't come down in the rain itself, because I want you to understand that due to the water cycle, what rises up is actually just water. But when precipitation, when rain comes down and goes through these plumes, these clouds, when you see these great smokestacks releasing all these fumes into the atmosphere, well, the rain, as it's coming down, it actually attaches. Remember the property of the cohesion and adhesion of the water molecule. They grab onto these pollutants, so it comes down as acid rain. Ocean acidification. This is something that I've actually been able to view, right, where we actually see the dying of coral. I'm going to have to stop this first part right here. We're approaching 10 minutes, and I will be editing a part 2.